Hi, I'm Michael James. Hit subscribe and let's dive into today's story.
I thought he was my forever until I caught him cheating with my money. Instead of crying, I exposed him, destroyed his reputation, and turned his lies into the ultimate revenge. I always thought revenge was something people fantasized about, but never truly followed through on. It sounded messy, dangerous, and honestly, beneath me. But when I look back at the chain of events that pulled me into it, I realize I didn't walk into revenge. I was dragged there, screaming, betrayed, and hollowed out. When I first met Daniel, it was at a work mixer I didn't even want to attend. I was tired, overworked, and had promised myself I'd only stay 30 minutes. He wasn't my type, at least not at first glance. Tall, lean, with sharp cheekbones, and that casual confidence that could border on arrogance. But he made me laugh. Not the polite kind of laugh I gave to colleagues, but real, belly-deep laughter that made my cheeks ache. He bought me a drink, insisted we sit away from the cluster of coworkers, and asked about my dreams instead of my role at the company. That was the hook. Nobody asked me about me. It was always about the project, the deadlines, the results. But Daniel leaned in and listened as though my words mattered more than the ambient chatter around us. We started dating almost immediately. He had this intensity about him, like I was the only person in the room whenever we were together. I'd catch myself daydreaming about our conversations long after they ended. When he sent goodnight texts, I smiled so hard it hurt. It felt like a whirlwind. He met my friends within weeks, charmed them effortlessly. My best friend Mia whispered to me one night after dinner, "Careful, men like that either turn out to be everything you hoped for or everything you should have feared." I brushed it off, too wrapped up in the glow of his attention. He cooked me dinners, learned the names of my coworkers, even showed up with coffee on mornings when I had early meetings. The little gestures hooked me deeper. After 6 months, he suggested moving in together. It felt fast, but his arguments made sense. We were already inseparable, and why pay two rents? Besides, he said, I want to fall asleep next to you every night, not just on weekends. I melted. The first few months of living together were blissful. He was attentive, affectionate, and seemed genuinely invested in building a life with me. I pictured marriage, children, a future. I started to believe I had finally found the man who would make me feel safe, cherished, chosen. But small cracks started showing. At first, they were almost invisible. He became more possessive about my time, asking why I needed girls' nights or questioning why I stayed late at work. He'd phrase it as concern, but there was an edge beneath the sweetness. I just worry, babe. You know I miss you when you're not home. He also began guarding his phone more closely. He used to leave it on the counter, unlocked, while he cooked. Now it lived face down in his pocket or disappeared into the bedroom when he showered. When I teased him about being glued to it, he laughed it off. Just work stuff, boring emails. The first real red flag came one Friday night. He told me he had to work late, but something in his tone felt rehearsed. I tried to ignore it, but Mia's warning echoed in my head. On impulse, I drove to his office with takeout, figuring I'd surprise him. But when I got there, the building was dark. No cars in the lot. His workspace, visible through the glass doors, was empty. My stomach twisted into knots. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, convincing myself there must be an explanation. When he finally texted, "Heading home now, can't wait to see you," I was shaking. When I asked him about it later, he spun a story about a client dinner that had come up last minute, how he didn't want to bore me with details. His smile was calm, his tone steady, but I noticed a flicker of something in his eyes, a crack in his perfect composure. I told myself to let it go. One lie didn't erase 6 months of love, right? One inconsistency didn't mean everything was fake. I clung to the good, the laughter, the tenderness, the way he whispered my name at night. But somewhere deep inside, a voice had woken up, a voice that whispered, "Watch closely, something's not right." Once that voice inside me woke up, I couldn't quiet it again. I became hyper-aware of every shift in his behavior, every glance at his phone, every excuse that didn't quite line up. At first I felt guilty. Snooping, even in my mind, felt like a betrayal of trust. I kept reminding myself of all the times he'd shown up for me, of the soft mornings when he kissed my forehead before leaving for work, of the way he once drove across Pound in the rain to bring me soup when I was sick. Those weren't the actions of a liar. They couldn't be. But still, the signs stacked up. He started coming home later, claiming deadlines were piling up. His clothes sometimes smelled faintly of perfume I didn't wear. He'd step outside to take calls, his voice low. And when I asked who it was, the answers were vague. Just a client, work buddy, nothing important. My breaking point came one night when he was in the shower. His phone buzzed on the counter, and without thinking, I picked it up. The notification preview showed a name I didn't recognize, Sophie. The message read, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you." My chest tightened so fast it felt like I couldn't breathe. My hand shook as I stared at the words, my brain scrambling for explanations. A cousin? A friend? A missent message? But my gut knew. It knew. When he came out, towel wrapped around his waist, steam following him like a ghost, I plastered on a smile and asked casually, "Who's Sophie?" He froze, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. His eyes widened before he laughed too quickly, too loud. "Oh, she's just someone from work. We've been brainstorming on a project." I nodded, pretending to buy it, but my insides churned. That night, when he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I replayed every moment of our relationship, searching for the pieces I had missed, the lies buried beneath the charm. And then, like a switch, something hardened in me. I wasn't going to cry myself into denial. I wasn't going to be the naive girl who turned away from the truth because it hurt too much. If he was lying, I would know for sure. So I started watching. I tracked his late nights, noting when he left and when he returned. I memorized his excuses and compared them to the evidence in front of me. I asked casual questions, testing his consistency. And slowly, his perfect stories began to unravel. One Saturday, he said he had to run errands. I followed him, heart pounding, hands clammy on the steering wheel. He didn't go to the hardware store like he claimed. He drove across town to a small cafe, parked, and walked in with a woman I instantly recognized from her Instagram, the same Sophie whose name had appeared on his phone. They didn't act like colleagues. They leaned across the table, hands brushing, faces too close. My chest burned as I watched him smile at her, the same smile he once reserved for me. I drove home in a fog. Every second of their interaction seared into my brain. Rage simmered beneath my ribs. But I told no one, not even Mia, not yet. Instead, I played the long game. I needed proof. Over the next weeks, I built my case like a detective. Screenshots of texts, photos of them together, recordings of phone calls I intercepted when his Bluetooth accidentally connected to the car we shared. Each piece of evidence felt like a dagger, but I collected them anyway, storing them in a hidden folder on my laptop. He noticed my distance, of course. He'd pull me close, ask if something was wrong, kiss me like he could erase my suspicions. I became an actress in my own life, smiling on cue, laughing when required, while inside I was a storm. And then, just as I was ready to confront him, fate handed me a weapon I hadn't dared hope for. I was cleaning out the spare room one afternoon when I found an envelope shoved into the back of his desk drawer. Inside were receipts, hotel bookings, dinners, flowers, all paid for with the joint credit card he begged me to open with him, saying it'll make us feel more like a team. My hands shook as I laid them out, one by one, like puzzle pieces that spelled betrayal. He wasn't just lying to me, he was using me, funding his affair with money that was half mine. In that moment, the rage crystallized into something sharp and clear. I wasn't just going to confront him, I was going to destroy him. But carefully, slowly, in a way that he'd never see coming. Once the plan began forming in my head, I felt something shift inside me. The despair and heartbreak that had been gnawing at me gave way to a kind of cold determination. If he wanted to play games, I was going to finish them with a finale he couldn't recover from. But I knew better than to rush. Confrontation would only give him the chance to deny, manipulate, or twist the story until I was the one apologizing. No, I wasn't going to scream or beg. I was going to prepare. Step 1 was securing myself financially. We had a joint account, and while he never questioned my withdrawals, I knew better than to leave my security tangled up with his. Quietly, I opened a separate account in my name and started siphoning money. Small amounts at first, just enough not to raise suspicion. Step 2 was building an airtight case. I doubled down on my evidence gathering. I pretended to be asleep when he crept out at night, then followed him from a distance. I snapped photos of him kissing Sophie outside her apartment. I even recorded a video of him walking into a hotel room with her and coming out the next morning in the same clothes. There was no denying it now. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a coward, a liar, and a parasite living off my trust. The hardest part was pretending nothing was wrong. I cooked dinner, laughed at his jokes, even let him kiss me. Some nights, I wanted to claw at my skin just to get the taste of him off me. But every fake smile was an investment in the endgame. Then came the opportunity I hadn't even dared to hope for. Sophie reached out to me. It happened late one night while I was scrolling through social media. A message popped up in my inbox from a profile I didn't recognize. It was her. "I don't know if you know me, but I think we should talk. It's about Daniel." My heart raced as I read it. I expected anger or competition, but her message was raw, hesitant, almost guilty. She had just discovered that he wasn't single. He had told her he was stuck in a toxic relationship with a clingy girlfriend he didn't know how to leave. That clingy girlfriend was me. Instead of raging at her, I did something unexpected. I thanked her. I told her I had suspected for weeks, that I wasn't angry at her, and that she wasn't the enemy. To my surprise, she agreed to meet. We sat across from each other in a cafe, and for the first time, I saw the other woman not as my rival, but as another victim of his manipulation. She looked younger than me, softer somehow, like she hadn't yet built up the armor life forces you to wear. Her voice shook as she told me how he promised her weekends away, how he said I was emotionally unstable, how he painted himself as a hero trapped in misery. It was surreal. He had taken my love story and twisted it into a sob story for her. And she believed it, just as I had once. By the time we finished, we weren't enemies, we were allies. And together, we decided to give him exactly what he deserved. The plan was simple. Let him incriminate himself beyond repair. She kept seeing him, playing the part of the oblivious girlfriend. I stayed silent, letting him think I was clueless. Meanwhile, we coordinated. She'd share his messages, his promises, his lies. I compiled them into a meticulous folder, labeled and timestamped. He told me he loved me while texting her, "I can't wait to spend forever with you." He told her he was leaving me while planning a vacation with me. His web of deceit was so tangled he couldn't possibly keep track anymore. And the best part? He had no idea we were both in on it. The night we executed the plan, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. We invited him to dinner under the pretense that Sophie wanted to finally meet his girlfriend. He walked in, smug and charming as ever, clearly convinced he could juggle us both. But when he sat down and saw the two of us smiling at him, not with warmth, but with the cold satisfaction of women who knew the truth, his face drained of color. For the first time, Daniel had no words. And that was just the beginning of his unraveling. I'll never forget the look on his face that night. Daniel walked into that little Italian restaurant like he owned the place, wearing the same smug grin that had once charmed me into believing he was my future. But when he saw me and Sophie sitting there, side by side, smiling like conspirators, something in him cracked. His swagger evaporated. For the first time, I saw the mask slip, and underneath it wasn't confidence, it was panic. He tried to play it off at first. "Wow, my two favorite girls together," he said with a nervous laugh, sliding into the seat across from us. "Didn't expect this surprise." Sophie and I exchanged a glance. She leaned forward, her voice steady but cold. "We know, Daniel." He blinked, feigning confusion. "Know what?" I pulled my phone from my purse and slid it across the table. On the screen was a folder of screenshots, photos, and recordings. Everything. His jaw tightened as he scrolled through the evidence. Every lie, every stolen night, every text promising her a future while telling me he was my forever. His hands trembled as he set the phone down, his eyes darting between us. "This isn't," he started, but Sophie cut him off. Don't insult us with more lies. We compared notes, Daniel. You told me she was controlling. You told her I was just a coworker. You used her money to take me on dates. Do you have any idea how pathetic that makes you look?" I expected him to lash out, to shout, to deny, but instead he crumbled. His face flushed red, and for the first time, he looked small, like a boy caught sneaking cookies from the jar. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he muttered, the words weak and limp. That's when I realized Daniel wasn't some master manipulator, not really. He was a coward who thrived on people's willingness to believe the best in him. His power came from secrecy, and now that it was gone, so was he. But I wasn't done. This wasn't going to end with a dramatic dinner scene. No, I wanted him to feel what it was like to have the rug ripped out from under him, to watch his carefully constructed lies collapse like a house of cards. After dinner, Sophie and I walked out together, leaving him alone at the table with his pathetic excuses. She hugged me tight in the parking lot. "You're stronger than I ever could have been," she whispered. But I wasn't sure it was strength. It felt more like cold fire, burning away whatever love I once had for him. The next morning, I put phase 2 into motion. I called the bank, had my name removed from the joint credit card, and froze the account. I filed paperwork to pull my money from our joint savings and redirected my paycheck into my private account. By the time he noticed, I've already built a wall of financial independence he couldn't breach. Then I went for the personal touches. I boxed up every gift he'd ever given me, every token of his so-called love, and dropped it on his car with a note, "Return to sender." But the real blow was yet to come. Remember those receipts I found in his drawer? The hotel bookings and dinners he charged on our joint account? I sent copies of them to HR at his company, along with the timestamps of his work nights. I didn't even need to add commentary. The evidence spoke for itself. Affairs might be personal, but stealing company time and lying about expenses? That was professional suicide. 2 days later, he stormed into our apartment, eyes wild, shouting that I had ruined his career. His voice echoed off the walls, but I just stood there, arms crossed. "No, Daniel," I said quietly. "You ruined it, yourself. I just handed people the truth." For once, he had no comeback. He packed a bag that night and walked out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I half expected him to beg, to cry, to pull some grand manipulative gesture, but he didn't. And somehow that silence was more satisfying than any apology could have been. I thought it was over, that I'd cut him out and could finally start healing. But I underestimated how messy the aftermath would be, because when someone like Daniel loses control, they don't go quietly. At first, I thought Daniel's exit would be permanent. He had his pride, and after being exposed so thoroughly, I imagined he'd vanish into Sophie's arms or crawl into whatever hole men like him disappear into. But I underestimated his need for control. The texts started the very next day. "You didn't have to go that far. We could have worked through this if you weren't so dramatic. Do you know what you've done to my reputation?" Each message dripped with blame, as if I had forced him to lie, cheat, and betray me. I ignored them at first, but ignoring Daniel was like throwing gasoline on a fire. He only burned hotter. Soon the messages escalated into calls, voicemails filled with rage and pleading. One night he stood outside the apartment, pounding on the door, demanding I let him in. My hands shook as I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. I realized then that I couldn't just defend myself reactively, I had to stay 3 steps ahead. So I changed the locks, blocked his number, alerted the building manager and neighbors not to buzz him in. I even installed a cheap security camera by the door. It felt paranoid, but the thought of him lurking in the shadows chilled me more than I wanted to admit. And still, he found ways. He started emailing from burner accounts, slipping notes under my door, even sending flowers with cryptic cards like, "You'll regret this," and "We're not done." It was Sophie who gave me the final piece of the puzzle. She called me one evening, her voice trembling. "She's telling me you're unstable, that you hacked his accounts, that you're obsessed with him." My blood boiled. The audacity of it, painting me as the villain after everything he had done. But then she said something that turned my anger into resolve. "She doesn't know I'm still talking to you. If you want to end this, we have to make it impossible for him to twist the story anymore." And that's when the true revenge took shape. Together, Sophie and I crafted a dossier, a comprehensive, indisputable chronicle of his lies. Screenshots of his texts to both of us, photos of him caught between our worlds, receipts of dinners in hotels, records of his harassment after I ended things. It was meticulous, organized, devastating. We didn't just send it to his company this time. We sent it to his family, his closest friends, even a professional group he was a part of that prided itself on integrity in business. Everywhere he painted himself as a charming, trustworthy man, we held up a mirror to the truth. The fallout was nuclear. His parents called me horrified. His sister messaged to apologize for his behavior. Friends I'd met through him blocked him outright after seeing the evidence. Sophie told me his coworkers barely spoke to him anymore, whispers following him down the hall. The once charismatic man who could charm anyone was suddenly radioactive. But revenge has a way of hollowing you out, even as it feeds you. The night after the emails went out, I sat on my couch, wine glass in hand, staring at the quiet apartment. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but instead I felt empty. He had taken so much from me, my trust, my peace, my sense of security. Exposing him didn't give those things back. It just left a crater where our life once was. Still, the practical side of me knew it wasn't over. Men like Daniel don't just disappear when the curtain falls. They linger, haunt, try to reclaim whatever scraps of control they can. Sure enough, a week later, I came home to find a note slid under my door. In his handwriting, jagged and frantic, "You think you won, but this isn't over." For the first time since the affair began, I felt real fear. Not of losing him, but of what he might do now that he had nothing left. And that fear was about to push me into decisions I never imagined I'd have to make. The note rattled me more than I wanted to admit. Up until then, I'd felt in control, like I was orchestrating the collapse of his double life. But holding that piece of paper, seeing his handwriting, I realized something chilling. Desperate men are unpredictable. I called Mia that night, voice shaking. "What if he tries to hurt me?" I asked. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. Instead, she came over with a baseball bat she kept in her trunk just in case, and sat on my couch while I tried to calm my racing thoughts. "File a restraining order," she urged. "Don't wait until he actually does something." The next morning, I did exactly that. I brought the texts, the voicemails, the emails, and now the note. The judge didn't hesitate. Daniel was served with a restraining order that very week. For a few blessed days, I felt a fragile sense of safety returning. The texts stopped. No more flowers, no more pounding on the door. I could finally breathe again. But Daniel wasn't finished. A week later, I got a call from HR at my job. Someone had sent them an anonymous tip claiming I was unstable, that I'd been harassing an ex and sabotaging his career out of jealousy. They even attached doctored screenshots of texts that supposedly came from me, texts that painted me as obsessive and unhinged. I knew immediately who was behind it. Daniel wasn't just trying to punish me personally. He wanted to strip me of everything, even my livelihood. Thankfully, HR didn't buy it. I'd been at the company long enough, built enough credibility, that the claims didn't stick. But the humiliation of sitting in that office while they showed me the lies made my stomach twist. It wasn't enough for him to lose, he wanted me ruined too. That night, I sat in the dark of my apartment, staring out the window at the city lights, and I made a decision. I wasn't going to live like a hunted animal. I wasn't going to flinch every time the phone rang or wonder if he was lurking in the shadows. If he wanted war, then war was what he'd get. I reached out to Sophie again. She'd been quiet since the dossier went out, dealing with her own fallout. But when I told her what he'd tried to do at my job, her fury reignited. He thinks he can rewrite the narrative, she said. We can't let him. Together, we started digging deeper, and what we uncovered shocked even me. Daniel wasn't just lying to us. He had a pattern. Through some careful online sleuthing and whispers from people who'd known him in the past, we discovered he'd pulled similar stunts with other women before. Relationships overlapped, money disappeared, reputations got tangled in his games. We weren't his first victims, just his latest. The realization sickened me, but it also gave me fuel. This wasn't just about one broken relationship anymore. This was about exposing a predator who had been leaving wreckage behind him for years. So we compiled everything, every shred of proof from his past, every story that women were willing to share once they knew they weren't alone. We built a narrative so undeniable, so damning, that it couldn't be ignored. And then we went public. We didn't just whisper in back channels. This time, Sophie and I posted a joint statement on social media attaching a heavily redacted but undeniable set of screenshots and testimonials. We didn't use slander. We didn't embellish. We simply told the truth. It spread like wildfire. People shared it, commented, added their own stories. Women I had never met messaged me with their own accounts of his lies. Piece by piece, the myth of Daniel, the charming, trustworthy man, crumbled in full view of everyone he had ever tried to impress. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt the weight lifting. The fear wasn't gone, but it was weaker now, because Daniel wasn't just my problem anymore. He was exposed, stripped of the shadows he had hidden in. But exposure, I would soon learn, doesn't always bring closure. Because while the world now saw him for what he was, I still had to live with the scars he left behind, and those scars would shape the choices I made long after he was gone. Going public was like lighting a fuse I couldn't control. At first, it felt empowering, watching people rally around me, reading messages from women who finally felt seen. But as the days passed, the fallout spiraled in ways I hadn't anticipated. Daniel's professional life disintegrated almost overnight. The company that had once overlooked his charm and networking skills couldn't ignore the evidence flooding social media. He was quietly let go, though word spread fast enough that the silence was pointless. The professional group he bragged about belonging to revoked his membership. His reputation, carefully curated over years, was shredded. Part of me savored it. After all the nights I'd cried, after all the times he'd made me question my worth, seeing him stripped of his power was intoxicating. But alongside that satisfaction came a gnawing unease. Revenge, I realized, doesn't come with clean edges. It's jagged, messy, and it cuts the hand that wields it too. My phone buzzed constantly. Supportive messages, yes, but also trolls accusing me of being vindictive. People who insisted I should have handled things privately. Even some of my extended family questioned why I would air dirty laundry online. They didn't understand that silence would have protected him, not me. The pressure weighed on me. I had nightmares of him pounding on my door again, nightmares of him turning the tables somehow and leaving me ruined. I started double-checking my locks every night, jumping at shadows in the hallway. Freedom felt close, but so did danger. And then there was Sophie. At first, we were united in our fight against him, but once the storm blew up, cracks appeared. She began receiving the exact same harassment I did. Anonymous messages, hateful comments, accusations of being a home wrecker. The emotional toll wore her down. One night, she called me sobbing. I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to get out of it clean, not have the whole world know. I tried to comfort her, but I could hear the resentment creeping in. In her mind, she had been collateral damage in my war, and maybe she was right. We drifted apart after that. Not out of malice, but because the weight of it all was too much to share. We had been allies forged in fire, but when the flames burned too hot, we retreated to survive separately. Meanwhile, Daniel found new ways to claw back control. Though publicly disgraced, he whispered in private, painting himself as a victim of a vindictive ex and a bitter fling. I caught wind of his stories through mutual acquaintances. Some people bought it, others didn't. But it was enough to remind me that, even destroyed, he still found ways to linger. The irony was cruel. I had exposed him to free myself, but in doing so, I tied myself to his name even more tightly. Wherever I went, people recognized me as that girl, the one who blew up her cheating ex online. My story became a cautionary tale, a spectacle. And while I never regretted telling the truth, I hated that his shadow still followed me. One evening, as I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, Mia came over and dropped a bombshell I wasn't prepared for. She said, "I ran into Daniel. He looks wrecked. Like really bad. He's crashing on someone's couch, hasn't shaved in weeks, drinking too much." I felt a strange twist in my chest. Not pity exactly, but something close to it. I had wanted him to pay, but hearing he was unraveling in real time, it felt heavier than I imagined. Mia must have seen the conflict on my face. She put her hand on mine. "Don't you dare feel guilty. He did this, not you." I nodded, but the guilt still lingered. Because revenge had never been about fairness. It had been about survival. And survival leaves scars on both the hunter and the hunted. I went to bed that night asking myself a question I never thought I'd consider. Had I gone too far? The answer I would soon discover was more complicated than yes or no, because the real aftermath wasn't his downfall. It was the way I'd have to rebuild myself from the ashes of the life we once shared. The weeks after Daniel's collapse blurred together in a haze of exhaustion. It was like I'd been living on adrenaline for months, my whole body wired for battle, and once the war was over, I crashed hard. I started noticing little things I hadn't before. My apartment felt emptier than I remembered, the silence pressing in where his presence used to fill the air. Even though I hated him, the absence still stung. It was like grieving a death, except the person was still alive, out there somewhere, and I had been the one to bury the relationship. Friends checked in constantly at first, inviting me out, trying to remind me of who I was before Daniel. I went along sometimes, smiling when expected, but I often came home feeling drained. It's strange, when you spend so long wrapped up in someone else's lies, you lose track of your own reflection. I barely recognized the woman staring at me in the mirror. Therapy became my lifeline. My therapist helped me untangle the mess of guilt, anger, and grief knotted in my chest. "Revenge gives you the illusion of control," she said once, her voice gentle but firm. "But control isn't healing. Healing is when you learn you don't need control anymore." I hated hearing that, but I knew she was right. My revenge had gutted him, sure, but it hadn't filled the hollow inside me. It hadn't given back the trust or innocence I'd lost. That work was mine alone to do. Still, moving on wasn't simple. Daniel lingered at the edges of my life like a shadow. Even months later, his name would pop up in whispers, in mutual circles, in the pitying looks of people who'd heard our story. I wanted to scream every time someone asked, "So, how are you holding up after everything?" And then, there were the scars he left on my ability to trust. Dating again felt impossible. Men would smile at me across bars or message me online, and all I saw were red flags waiting to bloom. Every notification, every unexplained absence, every vague excuse sent my heart racing with suspicion. I hated that he had rewired me this way, turned love into something dangerous instead of beautiful. But slowly, painfully, I started reclaiming pieces of myself. I redecorated the apartment, new curtains, new bedding, a bright rug that screamed of joy instead of secrecy. I traveled with Mia for a long weekend, just the two of us laughing until our stomachs hurt, like we used to before he consumed my world. I started writing again, something I had given up early in our relationship when he told me it was a cute hobby but not practical. Putting words on a page felt like breathing again. One night, after weeks of silence, I got another message from Sophie. It was simple. "I hope you're okay. I'm finally moving on." I stared at it for a long time before replying. "Me too," in my own way. We weren't friends anymore, really, but there was a quiet bond between us, two women who had survived the same storm and come out battered but alive. And Daniel, he became a ghost. Word trickled back occasionally. He'd moved cities, tried starting over, but his reputation followed him like a stain. I didn't take pleasure in it anymore. If anything, I pitied the shell of a man who couldn't stop destroying the lives of those who loved him. Yet, even in pity, I kept my guard up. I knew better than to believe he was truly gone. People like Daniel don't vanish. They resurface when least expected. That was the final scar he left on me, the inability to ever feel entirely safe. But here's the truth I eventually accepted. Survival isn't about going back to who you were. It's about becoming someone stronger, sharper, someone who carries the lessons of the fire without letting it consume them. I wasn't the naive woman who laughed too easily at his jokes anymore. I was someone forged in betrayal and revenge, someone who knew how dark love could turn. And while that might have made me wary, it also made me free. At least, that's what I told myself, until the day he reappeared, and the past came crashing back with a vengeance. It had been nearly a year since I'd last heard his voice when it happened. I was leaving the grocery store on an ordinary Thursday evening, my cart rattling across the parking lot, when I heard it. Low, casual, but unmistakable. "Hey, stranger." My blood froze. I turned, and there he was, Daniel. He looked different, thinner, hollowed out like life had chewed him up and spit him out. His once polished appearance was gone, replaced with scruff and tired eyes. But the smile, that same crooked smile he'd used to charm me in the beginning, was still there, and it made my stomach twist. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice sharper than I felt. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I refused to let him see fear. "Just to talk," he said, raising his hands like I'd caught him at gunpoint. "I know I messed up. More than messed up. I lost everything because of what happened. Because of you." The way he said it, "because of you," ignited a familiar rage. He hadn't changed. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to shift blame, to make himself the victim. I grabbed my bags from the cart, forcing my hands not to shake. "Stay away from me, Daniel. You're not supposed to be anywhere near me." He chuckled, bitter and low. "Restraining order expired months ago, remember?" The casual reminder sent a chill through me. Of course he knew the exact date it had lapsed. Of course he had been keeping track, waiting for the perfect moment to slither back. "Why now?" I demanded. His eyes softened, or maybe he just knew how to mimic softness. "Because I've been thinking about you. About us. We were good together once, weren't we? Don't you ever wonder if maybe we could find our way back?" For a second, I almost laughed. The audacity was staggering. After everything, the lies, the affair, the threats, the smear campaigns, he stood in a parking lot and suggested we could just rewind? I leaned in, my voice low and steady. "The only thing I wonder is how I ever fell for you in the first place." His smile faltered, just for a moment. Then the mask slipped, and the venom I remembered so well seeped through. "You think you won," he hissed, "but you don't get it. You'll never really be free of me. You'll always be the girl who tried to ruin me. That's your story now. Not mine, yours." The words hit harder than I expected, because deep down I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. His shadow was still tangled in my identity. People still whispered, still recognized me through the lens of what I'd done to him. He had turned me into a character in his story, even as I'd tried to erase him from mine. I walked away without another word, forcing myself not to look back, even as I felt his eyes burning holes into me. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped my keys trying to unlock the car. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my window felt like him lurking. Every vibration of my phone made me flinch. The fear I thought I'd buried came roaring back, fresh and raw. But here's the thing about fear. It can either paralyze you or sharpen you. And lying awake in the dark, I realized I couldn't let him keep writing my story. He wanted me afraid, haunted, forever tethered to him. No. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer. I refiled for another restraining order, this time backed with fresh evidence of his harassment. I also updated my locks again, changed my phone number, and cut ties with anyone still in contact with him. I wasn't naive anymore. Daniel wasn't just a bad boyfriend. He was a threat to my peace, my safety, my identity. And the only way to end it for good was to close every possible door he might use to crawl back into my life. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. About finally stepping out of the ruins of the past and claiming a future he couldn't touch. But as much as I braced myself for closure, part of me wondered if true freedom from him was even possible. And that question would haunt me until the very end.
The second restraining order went through fast. I told myself that was the end, that paper and distance would do what anger and exposure couldn't. But closure didn't arrive like a package. It came in fragments, a laugh without checking the windows, a day where his name never crossed my mind. A week later, I testified. Courtrooms are miserable. Creaking benches, stale air. I wore a plain blazer and my mother's locket. I told the judge everything, the affair, the harassment, the parking lot ambush. My voice shook, but it didn't break. When his attorney called me vengeful, I let silence carry the weight. The folder of evidence did the rest. Daniel looked smaller than I remembered, but rage still found him when he thought no one was watching. That glare that once made me shrink did nothing now. When the judge extended the order to 2 years and, after a violation surfaced, added counseling, he huffed like the world had betrayed him. The bailiff's hand on his shoulder was the period at the end of a sentence I'd been writing all year. I wish I could say that was the moment I felt free. It wasn't. Grief is sneaky. It barges in with a song, then asks, "Were any of the good moments real?" My therapist said the answer could be yes and still not excuse the rest. People can love you and harm you. Only one truth is required to leave. So I began the slowest revenge of all, a life he could never reach. I changed the locks on my routines. I took a self-defense class and learned my voice could be a weapon. I walked dogs at a rescue that smelled like wet fur and hope. I cooked for myself like I was worth the effort. Each morning I wrote 500 words, anything, until the page felt like home with the lights on. Months passed. One evening, Sophie's name blinked on my phone. She was moving to a new city, starting a program she'd been afraid to apply for when he colonized her thoughts. I kept the plans, she laughed. We talked about nothing important. We didn't mention him. The omission felt like an answered prayer. When dating tiptoed back into my life, it didn't come with fireworks. It was coffee with someone who showed up on time and didn't make me small. A walk where I said, I need to go slow. And he said, okay, like it was the easiest word in the world. I learned to enjoy green flags, plans kept, phones face down, apologies offered without ceremony. I learned to leave at the first sign of heat, disguised as light. Every story wants a final turn of the key. Mine came on an ordinary Tuesday. Leaving therapy after rain, I passed a bookstore window and saw a reflection I didn't recognize at first. Head high, shoulders loose, eyes steady. For a heartbeat, I waited for the old panic. It didn't come. My body, the last part of me that believed we were safe, finally exhaled. I won't pretend I forgive him. Forgiveness isn't my burden. Boundaries are. Justice didn't restore what I lost, but it kept me from losing more. Revenge gave me leverage, not peace. Peace arrived under quieter names: routine, friendship, work I'm proud of, laughter shared without flinching. The aftermath isn't a wasteland now. It's a garden I water with the ordinary. If there's a lesson, it's this. Trust the first small no in your gut. Name the red flags out loud. Keep receipts of your worth and your instincts. Love is not a riddle solved by shrinking. And if someone tries to turn your life into their alibi, write your own version, then lock the door. Daniel isn't the plot anymore. He's a footnote I consult only to remember how chapter headings are chosen. I won't fight to be the girl I was before. She didn't know what I know now. I'm someone else. A woman who shuts her laptop because she's writing again, who keeps mace on her keychain and softness in her voice, who reads endings without rushing because happy isn't a climax, it's a habit. That's my aftermath. Not a blaze, but a steady light. The relief of locking a door and knowing footsteps I hear belong to me.
Another story ends, but there are always more. Subscribe and stay tuned.